Thanks already for the amount of amazing encouragement, support, but also advice and debate that you have placed in the comments beneath last week's. I'd like to jump on some of those comments immediately because a lot of those questions centered around the why bother. The word rabbit hole came up a couple of times, Eurocrack, and you know, why, when there's kind of virtual in the box versions which are a lot cheaper, why go hardware? And I guess the answer is kind of simple. 34 years I've been stuck in front of a computer screen of some shape or form, long, and then wide and flat, and then curvy, and then really just fucking expensive. 34 years. So I want to cast off these silicon shackles, even if it is only for one day a week, to prove to myself that I can make music and sounds out of the box, whether that be in front of my piano, by plugging a vintage synth into some guitar pedals, or by using this new crazy bit of kit. And there's a big but here. I feel modular synths have a place of their very own in a recording studio or a working environment. And that is because what I've learned over this short sojourn into modular synthesis is they're not really trumped up effects units as I'd hope them to be. They're not even particularly good at being synths from what I've observed. Now what they can become are these independent organisms, these little synthy Frankensteins with several hearts, voice boxes and different ligaments and lots of bolts. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in collaborating with my Frankensynth to take me to worlds I could never have dreamt of. So without further ado, back to the shed, but without first an apology. Yes, only one film in, and I'm already having to apologise for something I stated as fact. Turns out, by two of you who've pointed this out, that it's total and utter bollocks. And that is that the case I bought was a Lomond case. It was actually a Lamond case, as in Ross Lamond, who is meant to be a ninja modular case builder. So apologies to him, and thanks to you for pointing that massive error out. Okay, back we go. Always nice to get a package from Rubber-Dub, my Eurocrack dealer in Glasgow. Now, if you recall last week, I did manage to get some power into my rack. I still had a couple of bits to add before they were fully wired in though. These were the bus sticks, which I now understand distribute power to the different modules in the rack in a tidy fashion, and my missing row 4 power module by AMS. In goes the final row power adapter. Now, as many of you pointed out, I don't require a different block of power for each of these. I can simply daisy chain the power units with these handy little leads that were in my original box from Rubber-Dub. I'm also told that a single block should be ample to power the whole unit. The bus sticks, one per rack, simply attach to the back of the row units and fix themselves to the back of the case with these adhesive pads. Now this is when you're going to see what a total klutz I am with anything manual. Never get me to put furniture together for you. Indeed, I have the manual dexterity of an arthritic lumberjack. See? Nice. Well, at least it's going to be hidden. I can hear some of you crying from here. Okay, so seeing as my initial interest in modular was to create a modulator unit, kind of like a posh pedal rack, the first natural model to install is the I/O, or the in and out module. I've gone for a single solution by IntelliGel. Like guitar pedals, I've been told you can't simply patch directly in via the patch cables to and from your computer interface. I think there's a difference in impedance, which means somewhere in the chain something is going to get nastily overloaded, and I imagine, like guitar pedals, it's a step down on the way in and a step up on the way out. So in goes the IntelliGel I/O, and this is when my lumberjack fingers are at their absolute worst. I had no idea how small these Eurorack modules are, and these little bolts are tiny. Okay, so now time to get the power to it, and I'm told it's best to power down the entire unit when doing this so you don't cause anything to short out, and I don't really know what that means, but it doesn't sound nice. Saucy. Okay, so I'm going to plug in my computer interface to the front, and we're going in and out stereo, although a lot of the time I'm sure I'm going to be in monoland. I'm firing a simple drum loop from my computer into the I/O unit, and now need to make my first patch. And by that I mean patch together the input with the output with this little patch cable. And hey presto, we have sound in and out. And is it me, or is there a lovely crunchy kind of quality to this? The metering seems at best incredibly sensitive, if not a little arbitrary, but I guess all you need to know is you've got something going in and out and it's not overloading. What's more important is how it sounds. So that's already raised a couple of questions in my mind, which I'd like to pose to Sandy, namely about the impedance thing. Sandy, over to you.
Hi Christian, pretty sweltering hot day here in Ridgefield, so apologies. I'm out in the barn today because I've just got my soldering iron station. I'm going to be putting together my output module today. Thought I'd talk a little bit about why we might need to step up and step down our inputs and outputs, as well as a couple of other questions that came up in the comments. First off though, someone in the comments kindly pointed out to me that Synthrotech, the company who made the kit for the power supply that I got, and the output module that I'm going to be putting together today, unfortunately seems to be run by a bit of a, I don't know, misogynist asshat is the only way to put it. So I won't be buying any more kit from them, that's for sure. Alternatives are probably like the 4MS power supply or something from Tip Top Audio. I haven't found another 1U output module of the same sort other than the IntelliGel ones. Unfortunately they won't fit my rails, so I'm just going to stick with the kit that I've got. At some point I'll probably look at DIYing one. For now I might just cover up the Synthrotech logo on mine. Okay, so I've got my soldering iron here, it's just heating up. I've also got my bill of materials here, my instructions, and my PCB. I've already got some diodes in there ready to solder. Why build an output module? Why start with something like that? Well, when you're interfacing with a Eurorack with any other gear, it's worth knowing that the Eurorack signals coming out of your synthesizer are much, much hotter than line level. So they generally need to be attenuated before they hit your interface. And the same goes for inputs. Typically you want to amplify your signals coming in if they're at line level, or really boost them if they're something like a guitar or a microphone. It's just about getting it up into the same voltage range. The voltage, you know, peak to peak on Eurorack is considerably higher than your sort of half a volt to a volt peak to peak that you get with line level. So I'm going to go with the 1U output module. Other output modules worth looking at would be something like the Bafako output modules. I know that Rosie by Make Noise is a really popular option. Pittsburgh Modular, a whole bunch. There's tons on the market. Just finding something that kind of does what you need to do. I'm going for something reasonably simple right now. Now that my soldering iron is getting nice and hot, very nearly ready to go, I'm going to start putting this thing together. One of the questions that came up in the thread below our first video was, why even bother with a hardware synthesizer? Software nowadays is so good, the audible quality is not going to be much different. So what's the value in a hardware synth? Well, to me it's not a question of audio fidelity, it's more a question of approach and just a bit of fun really. I view it as a hobby, something to put together, something to tinker with and experiment with. But really it's just in how you approach making sound with these things. I spend all day in front of a computer in my job, troubleshooting DAWs quite a lot as well, so at the end of the day I don't necessarily feel like doing a lot of music making in a DAW on a work day. Something like my Analog 4, my Analog Rhythm that I've got at the moment, and hopefully this synth as well, gets me away from the screen and you're sort of listening more than you're looking. You don't end up falling back on some old habits and old sort of tricks. So I find it gets the creative juices flowing a lot quicker, and of course being a sort of hardware setup, just hit record and tinker and you're sure to come up with something fun. But anyway, I'm going to crack on with this for now. I'll get this thing assembled, tested and stick it in my rack. So back to you for now, Christian.
Thanks, Sandy. There's just one more thing I wanted to try back in the shed, because I'm a bit of a slag. So it turns out yet again the opposite of what I said was in fact true. As corrected by Sandy, the audio needs to be stepped up on the way in and down on the way out. Now whilst I have a bunch of modules to go in, I'm practicing extreme delayed gratification and following your advice by putting one module in at a time so I can really work out what each module does. But I couldn't resist getting at least one more module in to see how we can change the sound. So here goes with an Erica voltage controlled filter. So in she goes, lesson for the day: don't use the power ribbon to keep your modules in place before bolting them in, because they won't keep the modules in place. And it's not as if she doesn't have a fragile valve in there. Okay, power her up and look at that glow. Although I can see it's not actually the valve that's doing that, it's a valve coloured LED. Okay, so let's get some signal in. The Erica module, I believe, is a mono filter with up to 3 inputs that you can independently mix with each of their line inputs. There are 2 outs, the VCF or the voltage controlled filter out, which is the kind of the action end of the module, and an extra mix out. So you can have a clean signal with how you've mixed the 3 inputs together before it passes to the filter state. Okay, so time for my first experiment. What if we were to cross-patch not only the filter but also the mix out into a second input? That would feed back, surely. Let's have a listen. Yep, so there's my first venture into my Frankensynth, and she sounds fat. So thanks as always for watching. If I'm going in the right direction, hit like. If you haven't yet, subscribe. But if you want to be notified, make sure you hit that bell. See you next Monday. First, an apology. Yes, they're after me. Go on, go on, go on.